Hello, welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be teaching a little bit about rendering. We're going to be doing this whole class online today, so it's going to be a whole digital meeting. What we're going to do is we're going to have a series of videos. I'm going to break them up so that they're not too many videos or too long, going over too many things. So I'm going to break them up into little chunks and explain each little section. And as I said, today we're going to be going over rendering. We're going to keep it pretty basic. We're going to be continuing on with what we've been doing in class so far. But today's what we're going to do is we're going to be focusing on just pretty much just looking at all the little tools you'll need to get yourself up and running. And what I've done is to keep it simple, because we've been doing a lot of modeling in class. I'd like to give you guys files that are already set up that you can kind of test with and get running with quickly. That way, then you guys can just play with tools as opposed to building these files all up from ground up. Afterwards, once you get used to it and you have some fun with this and doing some interesting things, then we'll apply them to your own projects. So then you can take your own files, your own models, and use them. So what I did was, as I said, I created this very specific file that is set up just to demonstrate a lot of rendering things like lighting, cameras, interface, etc. So what I did was you have it's called render demo file, and I'll provide it with lessons. You can just load it up, and when it comes in, it'll look like this. And so then you just take a look around at the file, and I'm going to explain all the different parts to it. So I'm going to go up here. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what's going on in this scene here. I'm going to change your camera. Here's your camera controls. We're going to get into this later, but I'm going to switch your camera around just so I can zoom out. So what I did was I created this file here. It's basically the equivalent of like a virtual photo studio. So I created a bunch of very common kind of my objects, as a cube, a sphere, a cylinder, a cone, polyhedron, just so that we can have some different kind of shapes to look at. And then what I did here in the background was I created this thing, which is basically a digital cyc. I don't know if anybody in class is familiar with photography or has done a lot of studio photography, but a cyc, what's called a cyclorama is the full name for it. It's a wall with rounded corners. So that what happens is when you zoom in and you blast the wall with light, it looks like an infinity wall. So there you go. So I've created all this for you so you don't have to set all the stuff up. You guys can all just jump into rendering and playing around and things like that. So in this lesson here, the first thing I'm going to do is just explain this file and explain different things in the interface you're going to have to, get when you get started with a file for rendering. So first thing is everybody's been modeling, so everybody's used to the interface of Maya. What happens is when you load your file up, you're going to have to go up. We're going to have to go up here, and you have to go. First thing is, by default, we'll be in the modeling module. What you need to do is go up here to the menu sets and switch to the rendering menu set or module. So if you notice, what happens is it changed a lot of the menu, the pull-down menu items here. And in Maya, this is where all the different menu sets are, because there's so many different things in Maya. It's almost like having like multiple little programs put together. So you have modeling, rigging, animation, FX, rendering, and then custom things. So we will be spending the next few lessons in rendering. So as I said, you'll see up here in the pull-down menus, you're going to have a different set of things than you've seen with modeling tools. We're going to primarily be focusing on some of the basics. So the key basic thing in when you get to rendering is, well, first thing is you have to create virtual cameras. So here's where your camera controls are. It's under create cameras. There's camera, camera aim, camera up. We're going to get into more detail with these later, but this is where they are. And I'm just going to show you subsets of things we're going to need right away. There's so many things in Maya that, you go on forever with. So the next key thing area, pull down menu we're going to be in is lighting and rendering. So this is where you get some of your materials, your lights, etc. So this is where you get it from pull down menu. Some people like the pull down menu. And then the other area we're going to focus on is in render. Pretty much render settings and render current frame will be the two picks you'll find up here that we need. But we can get to these things in other areas as well. So I'm going to show you around that in the file. So the next thing though is for this, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to stay away from too much of the deep menus and things like that. We'll use a lot of the shelves because it's going to have nice icons up there. In the past, Maya didn't have these things as much, but now they're all readily available here for you. So as you know, like with Maya, when you load up too, you're also usually in the poly modeling shelf is the default shelf. We're going to go over to the rendering shelf. And here is where you will see things like lighting, lights. These are different kind of lights we'll go over later. And these are some of your different kinds of materials. So these are where you find these in your shelves. Pretty much we're going to be focusing just on these little areas there. I don't want to get too much into some of the other things here. And then the other icon areas you're going to need also is these are the same as the render pull downs. So here's your open render view, and here's your render settings. So these are the two you're going to be using, and you just look up this video if if you forget or something like that. So and otherwise, then I've got a file set up pretty clean here. What I'm going to do now is well, I'm going to go over the file, and because now we're getting a little more advanced in our class. So it would be nice, if you're setting up pretty clean files now. I'm going to start looking for this when you hand in models. But as you know, as I've gone over before, like an outliner, it's good to name things and give it a geo or some kind of name afterwards so that it doesn't get confused with other things, because Maya doesn't like to have double naming. And a lot of times I'll match the name of the actual object with a layer. So as you see, we have plane, sphere, cube, cone, these all match to these things. And please, as you go forward now, really make sure your files are pretty cleanly set up, because as you get further and further into Maya and 3D graphics training, it gets more and more complex. And if you don't have files set up very clean, it gets very difficult. I've seen some students, come to files with great models, but like when I look into the outliner or something like that, it's a mess. So, and it's hard for me to actually look at what's happening there. So anyway, so here's the modeling items. Here's some of the lights. And here's some of the cameras. So like I said, we'll be going over those later. And then over here, I have corresponding nice layers so that we can access everything very nicely. And layers are always good because you can switch things on, switch things off. Like if I want to turn the sphere off, if I want to turn the cylinder, the platonic form off, I want to turn off the cylinder, I want to turn the cylinder back on, turn on the sphere. There we go. So that's always useful to have. So always, try and, keep nice layers. And the more you work in Maya, the more you'll find they're useful for you. So that is pretty much the first part of this lesson. It's just basically focusing on loading up the file, seeing where the menu items are, and just seeing good, clean structure to the file. So we'll stop here, and we'll get on to the next lesson.